Huge week. I think it's opened up a lot of old wounds at the Manly Seagulls, because we always seem to see with contracts and DCE that he has got a history of generating a lot of headlines. So I know amongst a lot of the ex-players, there's been a lot of talking behind the scenes, and it's polarised a lot of people.
Yeah, there's plenty of intrigue around it, obviously how it played out and the reasons for DCE leaving and what his future may be next. So it has asked a lot of questions in and around the Manly club and the game as a whole.
You any clearer, Gordy? We've been here for 3 days now.
Clear as that suit, Braith. I love it.
No, the shirt.
I love it, man. You pull it off. No, the brown? No,
the brown.
Look, you don't know where it's at, Manly, DCE, but, you know, he's not going to do this if he doesn't have a club to go to, so that's where he's going to land. But why did it happen, I suppose?
Hoops, what we've heard today, or what you've heard, is he actually asked for a release maybe once, even twice last year, or was it just the one time? Talk us through that.
Yeah, it feels as though this story's been brewing for a long time. So Daly definitely went to the Manly Seagulls in the off-season of 2024 and actually asked for a release then. So it was a tick over 12 months ago. I believe he only put that request forward once, but certainly rival clubs are aware of it. And now that this is all blown up the way that it has, it's become a discussion point. Manly, as far as I'm aware, have obviously kiboshed that and rejected it because he played there all of last season. But it does feel as though, now that we know that, it feels as though this hasn't been a snap decision, or this hasn't been a decision that he's only been sitting on for 3 or 4 months.
So what
this has been ongoing.
Why does a guy that had a 10-year deal, pretty much their captain, want that? What went so wrong?
Well, I think, Gordon, when you peel it all back and cut through all the BS, I actually think it's all about money. And I don't have a beef with that. I don't begrudge players earning as much as they possibly can in the short career window that they have. But if you really want to cut through all the red tape and all the BS that's been spun and flipped and gone over this week, I think the reality is that Manly could only afford to offer DCE around $700,000 a season. On the open market, you look at Dylan Brown, he's getting 1.3.
Yeah.
I think that's turned his head, and I think even prior to that, I think he's gone, you know what, I can go somewhere else and I can get a lot more.
I think it goes both ways a bit. They've lowballed him, if at all. I think Manly were unsure even if they wanted to re-sign him. So, and he's felt disrespected, in my opinion.
Do you think 750 is a low ball, Braith? Like
they didn't offer him 750. They didn't offer him a contract.
700. Well,
they didn't offer him a contract.
But this week they did.
This week they did, right. But his decision was already made.
It was made, right?
So
it's not a low ball if they haven't actually offered him anything.
Well, they haven't offered him anything.
Yeah, but they haven't lowballed him. They haven't come and said he's a $500,000 contract and do your best.
But what I'm saying is that the fact they didn't offer him anything, and talking about DC and his character and his standards and the way that he is as a human being, he's felt disrespected. So he's just made that call really early. And whether he's asked for a release because of that, really, he thought, you know what, these guys don't really value me, they don't want me, they're not even putting an offer forward to me, so why not go somewhere else and feel value?
I agree. The thing that Manly should have done differently is put a formal offer on the table when they thought they had that opportunity. Not this week. It should have been done a month or two ago, and only for 12 months, just to put the ball back in Daly's favour and see what he wanted to do and come back to him with a formal answer. The fact they didn't give him a formal offer until this week, I can understand why he's a bit aggrieved by that.
Well, they were waiting to see if any other clubs had put a formal offer to him, and with all due respect, I think Daly's just thought, well, they haven't told them. Like, they probably have had formal offers. They just haven't gone back to Manly because his decision was already made.
Well, clearly, though, if he has gone to the club a tick over 12 months ago and asked for that release then, you don't ask for a release unless you got somewhere else to go. So at that point in time, there has to have been another club who was going to be at the table with a significant amount of money. I think Daly's a sharp character, right? He's been around the game 15 seasons. He understands the business side of it and he understands his own market value. I think he's looked at what other players in key positions are earning, and I think he's thought, you know what, for everything I've put into this game, as much as he owes Manly, I think he feels as though...
Did Manly really... Did they really want him, though? Because the feeling is, the longer this drags out, you know, we were quite focused on DCE when it first broke because we were shocked, but we didn't know the background. Now we know the background. It feels to me like Manly didn't really show any urgency. And did they really want him, and how much did they value him?
Well, I don't think they're doing cartwheels that he's out the door, Braith. I don't think they're happy. No, I don't think they're happy that he's gone. No, I don't think they're happy that he's going. I think in an ideal world...
So they mismanaged it then?
Well, I think, as I said before, I think if they had their time over again, they would have put a formal offer to him weeks
But
ago,
if you're
months ago.
saying to me
But
that
they're not happy. They're not happy.
if
he's
they're
got
not
him.
worried, then why, if they had their time again, would they put a
No,
fine?
I think Manly thought-
I'm not
Manly
saying,
thought-
I'm not. No, let's be clear. I'm not
Okay.
saying they're happy that he's leaving.
Yeah.
They're unhappy about it. They would love to keep him for 12 more months and assess it year by year.
So why didn't they do it?
Because I think
they-
what
yeah.
they were led to believe over the course of December that in all likelihood Daly was either going to retire or he was going to go overseas. Now,
that's the deception, because they were told
they've
that, were they?
conveniently, perhaps they have conveniently believed that
Yeah.
because maybe they were beginning to plan for life after Daly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once he started the season in such red hot form, and I mean, he's a captain of the club. He's the most capped player in the history of the Seagulls.
Yeah.
I'm still stunned that he's not going to be there. But I think they realised the magnitude of it, and clearly they knew that they needed to get a formal offer on the table.
But surely, if he asked for a release and then he said, and like you haven't gone to him from like December, there's got to be something wrong, and there's no pipeline. So there's what, 700,000 to go replace Daly Cherry-Evans. Is that the money
Yes.
they got left? So there's no planning then.
Well, I
Well,
think,
no, they've
And
got
700,000
they've forward
on-
planned in that
Yep.
they've got a couple of good young kids.
Joey
that are-
Walsh and Tony Large are
Yes,
two big
correct.
ones that they
That are-
think are going to be long-term first graders, but I don't think they're going to be ready next year. That's the issue that Manly face now. Do they move Tom Trbojevic? Do they look to the open market to an Adam Reynolds and Mal Fogarty? What do they do
Move
there?
Tom to where?
The halves?
5'8".
Potentially.
That's when the talk is that they could potentially move Luke.
It's a big
Brooks to
change
7.
for Tom. No one's
It is.
really spoken about it in detail, but from fullback to defending at 3, which is what you do in the halves, and having to make decisions and release quickly and look at cover your inside, try to work with defenders either side of you. It's not something you just do over an off
Kicking
season.
game.
Kicking game.
Kicking game is the big one,
He'd be
for
great for a kick chase. He'd be a great runner of the ball as a half, but it's a huge transition, and he's not like Lockyer and Munster. He's a different player. He's a very different
Totally.
player.
GI
And he's-
did it.
and he's very GI, but he's probably different than GI. Oh, he's probably more similar
Similar
than GI.
body shape.
He's very injury prone too.
Apparently, he
tackles.
organises a lot of the attacking structure at Manly at the moment.
Okay.
Apparently, he's got a real voice in there in terms of their game on the field. I know Daly's obviously the premier playmaker, but he has a lot of say in what
Don't
goes
get me
on.
wrong. I think he'll be
Yeah.
a very,
That's
very
not Tom.
good half. Like he's Tom Trbojevic. You could put him anywhere, and I think he'll do a great job there. But it's not going to be that easy. Now DCE, he's been paid huge cash over 15 years, Hoops. And is there any resentment from former teammates at all?
I think there's resentment definitely from ex-Manly players who've bled for that jumper and won premierships with
Why?
that jumper. Well, because if you go back to 2016 when DCE did the backflip on the Gold Coast Titans, there were a lot of players like that Manly roster, and they'd won a couple of comps. They'd won one in 2008, they'd won one in 2011. Ultimately, that ended up getting torn apart. And at the central to it, a lot of it was Daly and the fact that his agents at the time were constantly agitating for more money. So I think that certainly amongst some of the retired champions, I don't think they've got too much of a high opinion of where Daly sits. I know that a lot of people in the game do have plenty of respect for him. And I also think amongst the dressing room right now,
the current
surely there are cracks in that dressing room
You
right
reckon?
now because, well, there's
Has to be,
players that have
Brave.
bled for that jumper.
I'm just asking the question.
He's
guys.
bled for that jumper too, Hoops. It's
You
not-
blokes
can't-
played. You blokes played, right? So
Of course
if
there
someone who's been at your club, let's
I was
go to the
hurt when
Broncos.
I went
If
to
Alfie
rugby
did it at the
union.
Broncos,
He wasn't going to play against me. He was going to rugby, and he said that we were going to stay together. Of course it hurts. Like when you lose someone that's a close mate and so
how would you
important to
feel,
the
Gordy,
organisation.
if Alfie or Kevy did that when you were at the Broncos? How would you feel?
I think you'd be let down because that's the only reason I went to play for Brisbane. And there'd be a lot of guys that have stayed because of DCE and they,
What
and
about-
he's a captain of the club and all that. Because like that's who you look to really.
What about you, Brave?
Yeah.
There's still 25 games to go for the rest of this season. How would you feel? You
I think a
captain
lot of
clubs.
it depends on situations. Like, if a group wants to stay together and win a premiership, a lot of players will take certain pay cuts or, I don't know what's going on there, but a lot of players will get together and go, okay, we want to work together here to win a comp. And
And that's exactly what happened at Manly back in the day.
So I can understand that because it kind of happened with me at the Bulldogs. A lot of us took pay cuts and then in the end, a couple of guys left. And then, we had players taking pay cuts and a few blokes who'd kind of left. Well, I was one of them. And then the guys ended up leaving. So then you look back and go, well, hang on. It's kind of, well, I could have still been at the club. And also, a few guys probably got moved on as well to keep these two big signings, who left early. I'm not going to name names because it's a bit disrespectful, but it does happen, right? And I left, so I don't know if it caused any unrest or not. But, I mean, it could. It does have the possibility to do that. I just think that you know, they do respect him. I know that DCE has spoken because a lot of
But
people
the
weren't
respect
aware.
would have
Just
dropped a
quickly,
little bit.
He had spoken to the Cherry-Evans brothers before he announced it on TV, like the senior players, to tell them that he was going to tell publicly say that he wasn't going to be there next year. So he, you know, there's an element of respect there that he's given them the heads up before the decision was made. I can't speak for him or the team because I don't know where they're at inside that.
You can't,
four
but the
walls.
Cherry-Evans boys, I think Bulldogs, I don't know how long ago, they offered pretty much both of them the farm, so they would have knocked back more money to stay. So like they would feel that way.
Yeah.
And if you look at the bloke here, Cooper Cronk and Cameron Smith, like when they left, like there was a split in the Melbourne Storm. That's the most recent big guy, big player in the big three to leave a club. Like it does happen.
One thing that kind of hasn't been spoken about, could part of this shit fight be driven by warring managers, Joe Weeby and Isaac Moses? Now, can you just explain the background between these two agents, who they look after, and what's kind of happened here?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story and subplot. So these two used to be thick as thieves. They're essentially business partners. Isaac's obviously extremely well known in the game. Joe Weeby's often referred to as the football whisperer or the halves whisperer, and he infiltrated the game. I think it was back with the Broncos actually when Wayne was still up there. They had a spectacular bust-up and finished up in the Supreme Court, but that was settled out of court because there was a risk that a lot of big-name players, Cameron Smith, James Tedesco, all of their contracts could have all of a sudden been brought up in this court case. So Isaac actually paid Joe to settle it. They split. Joe now looks after Daly, right? So he manages the affairs of Daly, whereas Isaac has Anthony Seibold and a hell of a lot of other players on the
And
Manly
Tedesco
roster.
left Isaac to go with Weeby as well.
Correct.
And Weeby has Robson at the Roosters.
Yes.
Reece Robson, yeah.
And is it fair to say that these two don't have a good relationship at all after that?
I think they're off completely. I wouldn't think they're speaking. Yeah.
Okay, because you know, I spoke to a couple of player agents after the show last night, and a few of them believe that there's a lot more to this. You know, this could, you know, I hear what they're saying, and I respect what they're saying, and it could possibly have an impact on it. But I also think DCE's a grown
Surely
man,
the player's smart enough.
and he's smart enough to not let an agent dictate where he goes.
Surely.
Right? I know, but subconsciously, I look at it like this too, Goody buddy. Subconsciously, if you've got an agent who is pushing you in one direction and is telling you that, you know, the club's done wrong by you, there's a better opportunity elsewhere, yada yada yada, can enter your mind whether
Can
you want it
influence you
to.
for sure,
It can
yeah.
influence you.
No doubt
So
it can.
I believe this is some sort of influence there, and this is not just two agents not getting along. This is the Supreme Court, right?
Yep.
And this is an agent who's got the head coach Seibold at Manly, and then key players at the Roosters, and rumours of him going there. So there is a connection, and there's a bit of a rivalry that's behind the scenes here.
Yeah, look, they don't get along. I'd think it'd be a lifetime feud. And look, you'd like to think Daly's old enough and ugly enough and he's been around the block enough. I don't think that he would let that influence his decision, but I do believe that when you join all those dots, it does begin to, and peel back the layers, it does begin to explain why there may have been some ill feeling and why they've ended up going in different directions, and Daly's now going to walk out the
And
door.
also, I think, strengthens that link to the Roosters.
Yes.
When you peel it all back.